Hi, this is Woolen Torment by Michael W. Lucas, recorded for my 2022 Kickstarter. Every moment, Uruk-hai regretted letting the paperman talk him into this. He knew in his bones that orcs did not belong in human places, not even in the liberated year of 1927. A downtown Detroit tailor's shop was more human than any place he'd ever been before, especially after closing hours. The smell wasn't too bad. A human might only smell cotton and wool. Uruk's sharper nose picked out the underlying taints of the acids and solvents used to torture those acres of raw materials into the fancy textures and colors humans preferred. And a human would need a very sensitive nose to pick out the traces of urine, mostly horse, but some human, from the leather belts and shoes. At least the shopkeeper hadn't tried to cover up the smells with sickly sweet perfume. The 3 bowls of dried flowers placed discreetly around the shop were something Uruk's wife Vara might use, if the clan had money for luxuries and she wanted to add a sweet scent. Besides, Uruk could drown that smell with one good fart. And the clothes. Uruk dressed properly for an orc. Sturdy canvas dungarees, heavy boots, a double layer of shirts, both burlap, plus his heavy third-hand wool coat to hoard heat against November's breath. Here, rolls of fabric hung on wall hooks like bottles of whiskey in a crate. Wool should be white, or stained a color that wouldn't show the muck. But these were pale brown and dark blue and even a rich ruby red. What kind of man would wear red clothes? Humans didn't like to fight hard enough that they needed clothes that could hide blood. Maybe upper-class humans snuck off somewhere orcs couldn't watch and held knife fight tournaments. He might like them more if they did. No, their blood dried dark brown. They had some other use for red. The shop felt too narrow for Uruk. The ceiling was high enough for him to stand comfortably, but the gap between the sacrificial dummy wearing a dress covered in tiny white beads and the impossibly feeble couch was so narrow that Uruk had to stand sideways and watch his feet to squeeze between them. Everywhere Uruk looked, he saw something fragile. If he sneezed, he'd ruin a month's wages. Let his dick get hard and he'd shatter something expensive. He'd been wise to demand his wife stay at home. "See," Sanford said, "you are doing just fine." Sanford didn't look like a bootlegger. Even a small snarl would frighten him. But as much as Uruk loathed to admit it, he needed the paperman. Sanford was a human word warrior, a lawyer. His spindly arms had all the strength they needed to lift a few pages of paper, and the shade of his skin reminded Uruk of the meat of that salmon he and his father had caught in the Detroit River so many years ago. And Sanford talked far too much. But the paperman could talk to men. He knew human respect chants. Those skills didn't help him get whiskey across the Detroit River. Uruk and his brothers could move the whiskey, but couldn't sell it to men. Their alliance brought the clan money. If Uruk needed a man as an ally, he wanted one whose marrow burned hot. He knew from hard experience that when roused, the scrawny paperman would fight to the limit of his strength, so he contented himself with grumbling, "This is stupid." Sanford smiled. "Not at all, my friend." "Friend?" Uruk bit back his outrage. To an orc, a friend was one who fought at your side. Humans threw such intimate words around without meaning. "Oblivious," Sanford said. "Once the new buyer sees you dressed like a businessman, we'll get twice as much." Humans got upset so easily. Uruk needed to be gentle. Then humans are stupid. Sanford only laughed. I can't argue with you. The door in the back of the shop opened. Uruk wasn't sure if the thing that emerged was a man or, perhaps, a possum that had learned to walk upright. No, Uruk had seen stronger-looking possums. The man's whole face seemed pulled back from his nose. Blotchy red and white skin shone through the pale hair swept back over his scalp. He wore wire frames over his eyes, filled with thick round windows. Glasses, men called them, as if you'd make a window out of anything but glass. Come in, good sirs. The man sounded like a possum, too, high and nasally and just a little bit coarse. Sanford held out his right hand. Hello, Reginald. Reginald? Too long for a name. How would Reginald's victims accuse him with their dying breath? No, it made sense. A man possum would never attack someone unless cornered, and even then he wouldn't finish the fight. Besides, this was America, not the old country. Despite Grandpa's tales, such things didn't happen here. Still, the man's parents had cursed him at birth. My dear Mr. Sanford, what a pleasure this is. Reginald came forward, holding both his hands out to grip Sanford's one. Reginald. Sanford raised his free hand, palm up. Uruk tensed. Had Reginald already offended Sanford? Would the paperman strike down the possum at their first greeting? If Reginald fought fiercely, he might harm the paperman, and Uruk needed Sanford. Uruk shifted his weight onto the balls of his feet. Something brushed against his back at the motion. The sensation quickened Uruk's pulse. Random smashing bored him, but he didn't want to accidentally topple one of these expensive displays. Rather than striking Reginald down, Sanford held his free hand towards Uruk. Permit me to introduce my associate. He had cleared his throat and attempted to growl. Urkatai! Uruk blinked. Sanford had once again failed to pronounce Uruk's simple Orcish name, but he'd never gotten so close before. Still, he could not let the mispronunciation stand. Uruk-tai. Mr. Tai, Reginald said. Uruk tensed. Only those from a feuding clan called an orc by his clan name. Whatever was brushing against Uruk's back wobbled. Uruk froze. If he destroyed this shop, the police would come. By dawn, Uruk would be on his way to a Jackson chain gang. But rather than declaring feud, Reginald crossed one arm over his chest and cradled his chin in the other. You are quite the challenge. His nose even twitched, just like a possum. I don't know that any tailor has ever attempted to craft a proper suit for an orc. Uruk didn't know of an orc that needed a man suit. Even if Sanford had this stupid idea, why would this tailor even try? Uruk let out his breath and tried to shift his weight forward without toppling whatever fragile things were precariously heaped behind him. Sir requires my undivided attention. I fear my fitting rooms are far too small, but I've cleared a space in the back. Reginald waved to the stockroom. If Sir would be so kind as to come with me. Sir? Wasn't this about Uruk getting different clothes? If Sanford didn't need Uruk for this, why had the man brought him along? Sanford glanced at Uruk, then at Reginald's retreating back. I think it best if I come along. Reginald glanced over his shoulder. If Sir has no objection. Wait, Reginald was calling Uruk, sir? Sanford leaned close, coming almost up to Uruk's chin. You said you've never seen a tailor. I can help with some of the more confusing parts. Uruk swallowed. Why was his mouth dry? You are the paper man. Sanford glanced at Reginald. That's a yes. Come along, Reginald said. I don't mind staying open for Sir, but I'm certain Sir would prefer to be at home as expeditiously as possible. What was the possum saying? Uruk answered with a grunt. Humans thought a grunt meant whatever they wanted it to mean, when they always meant, I'm not going to kill you now. Not that orcs in America killed humans. Anymore. Following Reginald, Uruk crouched to get through the door to the back room and down an uncomfortably narrow hallway with textured pattern walls. That wasn't paint. Was it paper? Had they put colored paper on the walls? Uruk's talons, even as neatly trimmed as he kept them, would gouge plaster, but one of his hangnails would shred paper. Entering the next room felt like an iron band loosening from around his chest. The ceiling ran up, a good 25 feet above the concrete floor. Heavy wooden shelves lined the walls, burdened with bundles of cloth in more colors than Uruk had ever imagined. Yes, he'd seen men dressed like songbirds every day of his life. But all this cloth gathered together in tight little rolls and bundles seemed a rainbow of 100 different shades, especially with November's gray choke on the outside world. Bright lights hung from the ceiling directly over mysterious tabletop machines. Reginald waved Uruk to a cleared section of floor in the center of the room, large enough to park a Model A in. If Sir would be so kind as to stand here so that I could take proper measurements. Was Reginald really calling Uruk Sir? Uruk caught himself glancing at Sanford and immediately jerked his gaze away. You've faced down men with machine guns and angry cows. Why does this possum unnerve you? Humans called orcs pigs or grunts. They didn't call orcs Sir. Uruk would rather be back out on Lake St. Clair gripping a gunwale and peering out over the black water for an approaching powerboat full of thugs with machine guns than let Reginald call him Sir again. At least then he'd know what was happening. Sanford said, He's just going to measure you. His voice got quiet. It won't hurt. Not only had Sanford noticed, the man thought he was afraid. Uruk bit back a roar, but didn't trust himself to form an answer. Instead, he stomped to the cleared concrete floor and glanced at Reginald. Reginald didn't seem to notice Uruk's glare, instead plucking a pad of paper and a pencil off a desk. Exactly so, sir. If Sir would be kind enough to stand there as I work. Standing was a kindness? Perhaps it was. He could crush an opossum with a step. Sanford claimed a nearby seat and folded one ankle over the opposite knee. His body seemed relaxed, but his eyes never left Uruk. He had almost orcish attention. Reginald stuck out his lips and hummed, staring at Uruk. Uruk's heart picked up and a tight knot formed in the back of his chest. Humans saw orcs all the time, but they never really looked at orcs. The sensation of Reginald so intently studying him left Uruk uneasy. If Sir would please relax, Reginald murmured. Did the possum want Uruk to lie on the floor? No, Uruk's shoulders were tight. His right hand had tensed as if he hadn't trimmed his talons. Treat it like waiting for an attack. Empty your thoughts. Look at nothing. Endure. Reginald hummed again and stepped to the side. Uruk shifted to face him. Please stand still, sir, Reginald said. I must see all of Sir if I am to ensure Sir's suit fits Sir properly. From his chair, Sanford said, "Why don't you look at me?" "If Sir likes." Uruk stilled his hands. An orc who ripped off a human's head went to prison and stayed there forever. Stupidity. Humans place great faith in appearance, Sanford said. If they see you in those canvas pants, they'll think you're dumb muscle. If they see you in a suit, though, you'll be someone of power. Orcs have power, Uruk said. Reginald had circled behind him, but Uruk could feel the man's possum vision against his back, studying him like a cow carcass hanging in the slaughterhouse. You have strength, Sanford said, and nobody can question your bravery. He paused. What did Tara call it? The respect chant? That's the Orcish term? Uruk grunted. Sanford had paid attention during that conversation. He shouldn't be killed now. Yes. Wearing a suit is part of the human respect chants. It means that you expect respect. Indeed it does, sir. Reginald had almost completely encircled Uruk. The clothes, as they say, make the man. Uruk let his lesser tusks show as he glared at Reginald. I will never be a man. Reginald's eyes fixed on Uruk's face. He turned even whiter. The Orcish word for human meant pale meat, from the days in the old country. To call an orc pale meat meant that they were fit only as food. And in America, nobody ate anyone. Not human, Sanford said quickly, but male, a husband, a father, that kind of man. Uruk glared at Reginald for a beat, just to make sure the man understood Uruk was choosing not to take offense. Your language is as stupid as your clothes. A thin line of tension bled out of Sanford. Utterly true. I spend entire days arguing about the meaning of words. Reginald circled back to the front. His face was still pale, and sweat dotted his scalp beneath his thin hair. He kept his attention on Uruk's face. Good. Reginald pulled a thin cloth tape from his pocket. If Sir would extend his arm for me, so I can measure? Uruk eyed the man. But this was what he'd come here for. He slowly raised his arm straight out from his shoulder. Reginald gulped. If Sir will excuse me, I must fetch my stool. Uruk said, Man Sanford, you think other men will offer me respect because of my clothes. Men do not respect orcs. Sanford gave a small nod. I respect your abilities. He tightened his jaw. The men we deal with, they respect competence. They respect money. Uruk let himself glance down at Reginald. A man does not know how to respect an orc. True, Sanford said. They will make mistakes. But you, Urka, you're a smart orc. You know the difference between being insulted because of ignorance and someone wanting to insult you. A smart orc. Like other orcs were stupid. And what did the intent matter? An insult was an insult. A child knows the difference. But not a man. Reginald set a short wooden stool down beside Uruk. Here we are, sir. The suit is a start, Sanford said. It says that you expect respect. Uruk left his arm straight out as Reginald struggled to circle his bicep. Do men not expect respect? It depends on the clothes, Sanford said. Human foolishness. Reginald made a tisk noise, wrote something on his notepad, and scuttled off his stool. If Sir could raise his other arm, I must take a chest measurement. Was Uruk a shaman's doll to be arranged before stabbing the enemy through the heart? Not even his wife took such liberties. But Vara clenched Uruk in her arms every night. She knew exactly how big he was. Zanford. Uruk raised his other arm, allowing Reginald to loop the tape around his back. This war needs you. I allow this out of respect. I know, Sanford said, and it helps that I'm paying for this first one. Uruk's chest swelled with tension. First one? A tiny popping noise. Oh dear, sir. Reginald hopped off the stool, holding both ends of a snapped measuring tape. A moment, sir. Once you see how wearing that suit changes things, Sanford said, you'll want another. Also, if things should... He eyed Reginald, scurrying through the clutter on a nearby table. Go wrong during a discussion. If your suit was to need repair or pick up stains too difficult to clean, you'd need another. The clan needs Sanford. Speak politely. You are wrong. Sanford shrugged. If I am, then it cost me a measure of your respect and the price of a very custom suit. I'm more concerned about the former. Sanford understood priorities. Uruk grunted. Reginald stepped back, swallowed, and looked up at Uruk. I fear, sir, that your clothing keeps me from obtaining an accurate measurement. It is most loose. Wherever does one obtain such garments? Uruk raised his chin. My wife sews them. And very fine work she does, sir. Truly skilled needlework, very strong. To craft you a suit, however, sir, I must have your measurements, not the measure of your garb. Reginald took a deep, shaky breath. Might I ask, sir, to remove his outer layer of clothing? Uruk cocked his head at the possum. Outer layer? How many layers did men wear? With quick, deft motions, Uruk stripped his shirts off over his head, untied the rope that held his pants up, and let them fall. Oh my, sir. Sanford averted his gaze. Good Lord, Urka, have orcs ever heard of underwear? No. What is underwear? Reginald said, traditionally, one wears smaller clothes beneath one's outer garments to protect one's clothing from the body's natural processes. Uruk said, You mean a fart makes your clothes dirty? Indeed, sir. Why would even humans wear such fragile clothes? Humans farted. Uruk couldn't spend a day in public without one of them letting off a good rip. Reginald, Sanford said slowly, let's add 2 sets of underwear to the order. Very good, sir. If sir would be so good as to remove his boots as well, we must arrange footwear for sir. Can you take those measurements? Sanford said. Certainly, Reginald said. Can you acquire the shoes? Sanford said. Boots, Uruk said. No orc wore shoes. The tiny ropes men used to tie them together wouldn't last an hour on an orc's feet. But of course, Reginald said to Sanford, a suit such as sir's will require the most special shoes. I said boots, Uruk snarled. Reginald blanched. It is all right, Urka. Sanford's voice shivered. Good. It is not all right. Boots. Sanford made an obvious effort to calm himself. If you require boots, then you will have boots. Uruk glared. You will not ignore me. Sir, Reginald fluttered his hand in front of his face, as if trying to generate a breeze against the sweat that had cropped up there. No, sir. I would never ignore, sir. You did ignore me. Uruk's hands itched. Never again. As sir says. Reginald looked like he might faint. Do orcs not wear shoes? Sanford said. They are too weak for orcish feet. Uruk could haul cargo all day, wrestle with his boys, ravish his wife twice, and still feel less tired than explaining the simplest facts to a human. Even you must hold them together with string. Indeed, sir. Reginald's eyes didn't leave Uruk's face. Good. I shall rise to the occasion. Sir shall have boots with his suit, the finest handcrafted boots. They will fit Sir's feet perfectly. Steel-toed, Uruk said. Reginald glanced down at Uruk's feet. Uruk could tell exactly when Reginald realized the strength of Uruk's trimmed talons. Yes, I do believe Sir is most wise. Steel toes. Uruk grunted. Reginald squeezed his elbows to his side as if he was trying to hold his ribs in place. His replacement tape measure was wound so tight around his hand that the fingers were turning even whiter. His notepad shook in the other. If Sir would allow me to proceed. Uruk raised his arms. Reginald scurried in. He will finish soon, Sanford said. Reginald's father made my father's suits. The flimsy tape tickled Uruk's chest. He didn't bat it away. Do you try to make me like you? Sanford laughed. Uruk, my friend, even divine intervention couldn't make you like me. If Sanford so wanted to be a friend, then Uruk could arrange a fight. Let Sanford prove himself at Uruk's side. Perhaps this new buyer would give them trouble. Sanford said, I brought you to my family tailor because I want you to have a suit as good as mine. We are partners. Neither of us can succeed without the other. Uruk grunted. If Sir would fully inhale, Sir's suit must have enough space for... Just so, sir. Our customers must see us as equals, Sanford said. Uruk frowned. Why is this important to you, man? I'm not a strong person. Sanford stared into empty space. Alone, some of these people would force me to work for them. But if I have a partner... He focused back on Uruk. A strong, fast, cunning partner. If we're halfway through a run, a war, as you say, and something happens to me, if a buyer betrays us, you would make them pay. It would be literal bloody war. Something you cannot do for me. You've seen what I do with the law, Sanford said. If you went down, I'd attack their business. A human without money, without friends, without family, your brothers would handle what remained. Uruk grunted. Then this suit protects you. It does nothing for me. Oh no, Sanford said. You can't dress like a dock worker and demand big money. Dressing the part shows you can deliver. Yes, Sanford knew better than to carry a cow on his own. Uruk needed to learn to not war with words against a lawyer. Or to get better words. Reginald knelt, running the tape measure down the outside of his leg. The gesture made Uruk strangely uncomfortable, like a surrender he hadn't earned. He fought down the urge to scream at the man to stand, to endure. Rising, Reginald said, If Sir would care to dress again, Sir can select his fabric. Uruk reached for his pants. Fabric? Would you dress me in red? Not at all, sir. Reginald fanned his face. Sir must have a serious suit for serious business. That leaves many fabrics for consideration. Also, he licked his lips. How does Sir feel about suspenders? Uruk frowned. Suspenders? For Sir's pants. Uruk's frown deepened. I fear Sir is flat-seated. Uruk's frustration at the possum's tedious speech was starting to sizzle up his spine. Say what you mean, man. Sanford said, he means you have no butt. And you have no dick, Uruk said. The way a suit is cut, Sanford said, you can either tie it up with a belt or with suspenders. They clip to your belt and go over your shoulders, like on overalls. I've seen orcs with overalls. As Sir says. What's wrong with them? Uruk said. I make the finest suspenders, Reginald said. Don't claw the human. Don't claw the human. Why do you ask, then? Some people do not care for them, Reginald said. They feel suspenders are lower class. So important humans have bigger asses? Sanford bellowed a laugh. Sir, not at all, sir. Why had the man even asked, then? I am an orc. Orcs wear overalls. Sir? That's a yes, Sanford said. 2 pairs of suspenders. Reginald drew his first full breath since he'd started measuring. As Sir wishes. Once Uruk had his boots on, Reginald said, I took the liberty of laying out some fabric samples that I felt might be suitable. If Sir would look this way? A nearby table held a dozen scraps of cloth, from a few inches on a side to almost a yard. While the room held fabrics of hundreds of colors, these were all dark blues and browns and blacks. Uruk eyed a swatch the same blue as the Detroit River on a dark day. Thin parallel black lines ran through it. If Sir would care to examine the samples, Sir could express his preferences. If none of these will do, I have many others. Uruk picked up the blue swatch. The softness sent a revolted shudder up his arm. He instinctively flicked it away. Reginald scuttled back a yard. Uruk, Sanford said. His tusks were showing, not merely the lesser, but the greater as well. Uruk felt the iron-hard tension in his shoulders and down his spine. His weight had shifted onto the balls of his feet, and his toe talons scratched against the steel lining of his boots. Uruk had never felt anything as repulsive as that cloth. You wear that? Sanford took a step back, arms raised. It's okay, Uruk. It is not okay. No, he was shouting in Orcish now. His heart pounded against his ribs, and his breath felt a fire in his lungs. The need to upend the table, to slash that horrid softness to shreds, burned his marrow. No, no. Uruk clamped his mouth shut and pulled his hands into fists to conceal his talons. Was he going to let a piece of cloth send him to prison? Hurt the clan? It took all his will to stand in place and push the revolted fury away. The possum inched to put a table between himself and Uruk. Sanford, to his credit, did not retreat further. If Sir... Hush, Sanford said. He will speak when he is ready to. Uruk needed another moment before he could say, that cloth is... No, it is... He had to forcibly loosen his jaw to say, it is the most awful thing I have ever touched. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then, if Sir would care to say how. Uruk's hands were fists. Orcs fought with talons, not fists. His talons were trimmed, but to a human he'd looked like he was ready to fight. He deliberately unrolled his hands, not far enough to use the talons, but enough that he didn't look ready to punch a man's head to Canada. Uruk raised his pinky and dragged one neatly trimmed talon across another sample. It parted like porridge. This cloth, it is soft like rotting fungus. It is not Orcish. Reginald eyed Uruk's clothing, nodding. The fear had left his face, replaced by a thoughtful expression. If Sir would wait a moment, I shall fetch some samples Sir might find more suitable. Uruk concentrated on banking the fire in his heart. Orcs are so tough, Sanford said. It never occurred to me that fine cloth would distress you. That's not cloth, Uruk said. That is torture. Sanford spoke slowly. I told Reginald that I wanted you to have a good suit, made with good cloth. A human would find that material most pleasant. His intent was to please you. Intent, intent, intent. What was it with humans thinking that intentions meant anything? You declare that this suit is a necessity. I will not allow myself to be offended. Uruk drew a breath. This time. Thank you. Reginald scurried back, holding a decrepit box with bits of cloth poking out. I've gathered some samples that Sir might find more pleasant. The colors are not correct, but if Sir would care to find a fabric that pleases him, I will arrange dyeing. If anyone would arrange any dyeing, it would be Uruk. The box thudded onto the table. Uruk couldn't help pausing as he looked at the box. No. He was an orc. Orcs endured. He thrust a hand into the box. Nothing appalled him. In another minute, he had chosen a chunk of coarse wool. The fibers dragged at his skin, and the cloth felt heavy enough to withstand a sneeze. This. Reginald took it, eyebrows raised, and rolled the material between his pasty white fingers. When Mr. Sanford asked me to sew a suit for an orc, he said slowly, I thought, if I can accomplish this, I would be the greatest tailor in Detroit. I did not expect how great a challenge. The man's eyes burned with hunger for a worthy battle, the first expression Uruk recognized. If Sir would care to return in a week for Sir's first fitting. What is a first fitting? I thought I was getting a suit. I'll have the first cut of Sir's suit ready, but it will require adjustment. It must fit Sir perfectly, as Sir deserves. 8 days, Uruk nodded. We work 1 week from tonight. Reginald said, 8 days would be suitable, Sir. And for the underwear, most men would prefer soft cotton. Uruk tensed. But for Sir, might I suggest canvas? Uruk grunted, letting the tension bleed away. As Sir wishes. Anything else? Sanford said. I suspect Sir would not care for a tie. Sanford said, You suspect correctly. You do not speak for me, Uruk said. What is this tie? Sanford reached up and flapped the ridiculous red noose that dangled around his neck. Sanford had guessed well, but Uruk would never say that. No tie. As Sir wishes. 8 days, then? Until then, Sanford said. Urka, shall we? Go, that is. Uruk looked at the possum and made his mouth form the words. No blood tonight. Reginald glanced at Sanford. It's an orcish fare-thee-well, Sanford said. Sort of. Good night, Reginald. Uruk retrieved his heavy wool coat and trudged after Sanford into the front of the store. Sanford stopped next to a display of those absurd ties to button his coat. Thank you, Urka. I know that was very... He looped a scarf around his neck, clearly buying himself a moment to think. Un-orcish. Uruk grunted. You want me to have a suit to protect you. And to bring us money, Sanford said. But to protect you. Sanford frowned and faced Uruk, looking straight up into his face. Listen to me, Orc. He folded his arms across his chest. We're bootleggers, and if we're going to bootleg, we're going to be the best bootleggers in Detroit. That means we deliver the best booze. We demand top dollar for it, and a suit is part of that. And most important, he raised a finger. I go home to Beverly, and you return home to your clan, He raised a hand to cover his cough. To your wife, your sons. The man understood. Yes. Sorry, Sanford cleared his throat. I'll practice your name, but there's no way I'm mispronouncing your wife's name. Uruk couldn't help his nod. The man could learn. Uruk could work with that. If this suit brings more money, Uruk said, I shall buy another. Thank you.